New at midday, Grammy-nominated musician John Forté has died. Police say Forté was found dead on Monday in his Chilmark, Massachusetts home. There were no signs of foul play, and the case is being investigated by the state medical examiner's office.
A Grammy-nominated artist who worked alongside the Fugees just passed away. John Forté, the man who helped shape one of hip-hop's most important albums, is gone at 50 years old.
His cause of death is unclear, but police don't suspect foul play. He's known for working with the Fugees on a record that was up for Album of the Year in the 90s.
On January 12, 2026, the music world lost someone who contributed to hip-hop history in ways most people don't even know about. News of his passing was confirmed on January 13th. This is the same artist who produced tracks on The Score, the album that went 6 times platinum and changed rap music forever.
But while he was building this career, he got caught up in some madness. He told me he had a desire to be seen as this wealthy rapper, but his music wasn't yet bringing in that kind of money.
This situation involves John Forté, a producer, songwriter, and artist who worked with the Fugees during their peak, earned a Grammy nomination for his solo work, and then faced a journey that took him from the top of the industry to federal custody and back.
You got sentenced to 14 years.
Yeah, 168 months. The reason, and it's important. Well, I say that because that's how it's worded in your sentencing.
Right.
So you've got to do that calculation, kind of Johnny on the spot. And if you're pretty good with math, the judge doesn't say 14 years. The judge says, your guideline range is 168 months to 210 months, and so. So I was on the bottom end of my guideline.
The hip-hop community is mourning someone whose story goes way deeper than most people realize. From his early days working with Wyclef Jean and the Fugees to his solo career, his federal case that shocked the industry, and his work after coming home, John Forté's life was full of turns nobody expected.
He was living right. He made a mistake and rebounded from that mistake and got back on track. He lived the last part of his life the way he wanted to. John was a lovely guy, very intelligent, great energy, always fun to be around. He will be missed by many.
Here's what actually went down. Let me break down who he was, what he contributed to hip-hop, and why his passing matters more than you might think. Let's start from the beginning. To understand this, you've got to know who John Forté really was in the hip-hop landscape. John Forté was born on January 30th, 1975, in Brooklyn, New York, but grew up in South Carolina. He came up in an era when hip-hop was transitioning from the golden age into something new. His connection to the Fugees happened in the early 1990s when he was introduced to the group by Lauryn Hill, who he'd met at Phillips Exeter Academy in New Hampshire. That relationship brought him into the Fugees' orbit at exactly the right time. In 1996, The Score dropped and changed everything. The album featured hits that are still getting played today. John Forté contributed as a producer and songwriter on that project. According to Pitchfork and Variety, his work on The Score helped establish him as someone who understood both the artistic and commercial sides of hip-hop production. The album went on to sell over 6 million copies in the United States alone, becoming one of the best-selling hip-hop albums of all time. At just 21 years old, Forté received a Grammy nomination for Album of the Year for his production work on The Score. But Forté wasn't content just being behind the scenes. In 1998, he released his debut solo album, Poli-Sci, on Rawkus Records. The album showcased him as an artist in his own right, blending conscious rap with the production skills he'd honed working with the Fugees. The project featured the track 99, Flash the Message, which peaked at number 59 on the Billboard Hot 100. Those who followed hip-hop in the late 90s knew Forté represented something specific. He came from the conscious rap tradition, the kind of artist who wrote lyrics with substance and produced tracks with layers. He worked with Wyclef Jean on multiple projects beyond The Score. According to reports from various outlets, he was part of the extended refugee camp collective that dominated that era of hip-hop. Here's where things get complicated. At the height of his career, when he should have been working on his second album and building on his early success, everything changed. In 2000, John Forté was arrested on federal charges. According to The Guardian, he was caught at Newark Airport with approximately 31 pounds of liquid substance hidden in music equipment cases. The feds came with everything, and Forté found himself facing serious time. Federal prosecutors charged him with conspiracy to possess with intent to distribute. The case moved through the system, and in 2008, Forté was sentenced to 14 years in federal custody. For someone who'd been nominated for a Grammy just years earlier, who'd worked on one of hip-hop's most important albums, this was devastating. The music industry basically wrote him off. Now, this is when things really got heavy for his career and his life. The details of Forté's case painted a picture that shocked people who knew his music. According to court documents and reporting from multiple outlets, he was allegedly transporting the material from Texas to Newark when authorities intercepted him. The substance was hidden inside musical equipment, which made the case particularly notable, given his background as a producer. Federal agents had been watching. They knew what they were looking for when they stopped him at the airport. This wasn't a random search. Law enforcement had intelligence that led them to Forté specifically. The amount involved and the interstate nature of the alleged activity made this a serious federal case with mandatory minimum sentencing guidelines. What made Forté's situation particularly tragic was the timing and the context. He wasn't some street rapper whose lyrics matched his lifestyle. He was a Grammy-nominated artist who came from a prep school background, who made conscious rap, who seemed to be on a different path. The disconnect between his public image and the federal charges caught everyone off guard. The hip-hop community's reaction was complicated. Some people expressed shock and disbelief. Others pointed to the pressures and temptations that come with the music industry. According to various reports, people close to Forté suggested he got caught up in something trying to maintain a lifestyle or deal with financial pressures. The music industry can be brutal, especially for artists who had success but weren't seeing consistent money from their Grammy-nominated work. Federal prosecutors weren't playing around. The 14-year sentence sent a message. This was during an era when federal enforcement was particularly aggressive, and judges had less discretion in sentencing because of mandatory minimums. Forté's lawyers tried to argue for leniency based on his contributions to music and his character, but federal guidelines limited what the judge could do. The hip-hop community had mixed responses when the news broke about his conviction. Some artists spoke up in support. Wyclef Jean, who'd worked closely with Forté for years, reportedly stayed connected with him. According to various sources, members of the hip-hop community who knew Forté personally struggled with reconciling the person they knew with the federal charges he faced. His early Grammy recognition for The Score made the situation even more shocking. Others stayed silent. The music industry often distances itself quickly when legal trouble hits, especially federal cases. Record labels, collaborators, and industry figures who'd worked with Forté largely went quiet. That's how the business works. Association with federal cases creates risk for everyone involved. Social media wasn't what it is now in 2000, but hip-hop forums and blogs covered the story extensively. The consensus seemed to be shock mixed with disappointment. Here was someone who'd contributed to The Score, who'd been nominated for a Grammy, now facing more than a decade in federal custody. The broader conversation touched on issues that still resonate today. Questions about the justice system, about mandatory minimums, about how the war on certain substances affected communities and individuals. Forté's case became part of that larger discussion, though his specific story got lost in the noise as other hip-hop legal sagas developed. But that's not even the craziest part of Forté's story. While Forté sat in federal custody, something unexpected happened. High-profile advocates started pushing for his release. According to The Guardian and other sources, Carly Simon, the legendary singer-songwriter, became one of his most vocal supporters. She worked on getting him clemency, reaching out to political figures and leveraging her connections. Senator Orrin Hatch from Utah also got involved in advocating for Forté's release. The coalition of supporters arguing for clemency was unusual. You had music industry figures, political leaders, and activists all pointing to Forté's case as an example of excessive sentencing and wasted potential. The advocacy campaign lasted for months. Supporters argued that Forté had no prior criminal record, that his case represented the problems with mandatory minimum sentencing, and that keeping him locked up served no purpose beyond punishment. They pointed to his contributions to music and his potential to contribute to society if released. Then, in late 2008, just weeks before leaving office, President George W. Bush granted Forté clemency. According to reports from Variety and People magazine, Bush commuted Forté's sentence, allowing him to be released on December 22, 2008, after serving approximately 7 years of his 14-year sentence. The news shocked people. Presidential clemency is rare, especially for federal cases. The fact that Forté's advocates had successfully lobbied a Republican president to grant clemency to someone convicted in a federal case was remarkable. It spoke to both the strength of his support network and possibly to questions about the severity of his original sentence. After 7 years in federal custody, Forté was finally coming home. Forté's release in 2008 gave him a second chance that most people in federal custody never get. He came home at a time when he was still young enough to rebuild his life and potentially restart his career. The question became, what would he do with that opportunity? Here's where it gets interesting and shows you who Forté really was. After his release, Forté didn't disappear. He got back into music, but he also became an advocate for criminal justice reform. According to various sources, he started speaking about his experience in the federal system, about mandatory minimums, about second chances. His story became part of a larger conversation about mass incarceration and sentencing reform. He released release new music after coming home. In 2012, he put out an album called Water Light Sound. The project reflected his experiences and his growth. While it didn't achieve the commercial success of his earlier work, it showed that Forté still had something to say artistically. What's notable is how Forté used his platform after release. Many artists who come home from federal custody stay quiet about their cases, trying to move on and rebuild without calling attention to their past. Forté took a different approach. He acknowledged what happened, spoke about the system's problems, and tried to turn his experience into something constructive. His advocacy work connected him with organizations focused on criminal justice reform. According to reporting, he worked with groups pushing for changes to mandatory minimum sentencing laws and supporting people re-entering society after incarceration. His Grammy nomination and his work with the Fugees gave him credibility, while his federal case gave him first-hand knowledge of the system's problems. The music industry's relationship with Forté after his release was complicated. Some doors that had been open before his arrest stayed closed. Radio play for his new music was limited. Major label deals didn't materialize the way they might have if his career hadn't been interrupted. But he found his lane, working independently and focusing on projects that mattered to him. Forté's story represents something specific in hip-hop history. The journey from working on the score to federal custody to presidential clemency to becoming an advocate is unique. Most artists don't experience that range of circumstances. His life embodied both the heights of hip-hop success and the consequences that can come from choices made under pressure. The presidential clemency aspect of his story remains remarkable. According to statistics on federal clemency grants, the number of people who receive presidential commutation is extremely small compared to the total number of people serving federal sentences. The fact that Forté's case attracted enough attention and support to reach that level speaks to the people who believed in his potential and his character. So that's where we're at with this whole situation. On January 12, 2026, John Forté passed away at 50 years old. According to reports from The Guardian, LA Times, Pitchfork, and Variety, he was found unresponsive in his kitchen at his home in Chilmark, Massachusetts, at approximately 2:25 p.m. A neighbor discovered him. The news was confirmed on January 13th and came as a shock to the hip-hop community. The circumstances surrounding his passing weren't immediately disclosed in initial reports, though sources later indicated he had experienced a seizure about a year prior and had been on medication for grand mal seizures. Wyclef Jean posted a tribute on social media expressing his grief. According to the Haitian Times and other sources covering the reaction, members of the Fugees collective and artists who'd worked with Forté shared memories and condolences. The outpouring showed that despite the years since the score and despite everything that happened, Forté remained respected by the people who knew him and his work. He left behind his wife, photographer Lara Fuller, and their two children, Haley and Ren. The timing of his passing is particularly heavy. At 50 years old, Forté was still relatively young. He'd survived federal custody, received presidential clemency, rebuilt aspects of his career, and found purpose in advocacy work. The fact that his life ended now, when he'd seemingly found some balance and meaning after everything he'd been through, makes the loss more tragic. Looking back at Forté's contributions to hip-hop, the score stands as his most significant legacy. That album influenced countless artists and remains a touchstone in hip-hop history. His production work and songwriting on that project alone secured his place in the culture. The Grammy nomination for Album of the Year when he was just 21 showed he had serious talent. His solo work on Poli-Sci demonstrated he could hold his own as an artist, with 99 making waves on the Billboard charts. But Forté's story is about more than just music. It's about second chances, about presidential clemency, about trying to rebuild after federal custody, about using experience to advocate for others. His journey from Brooklyn to South Carolina to prep school to the Fugees to Grammy nominations to federal custody to clemency to advocacy work represents a life that touched multiple aspects of American culture. The hip-hop community is mourning not just a producer or artist, but someone whose story embodied both the possibilities and the pitfalls that come with life in and around the music industry. Forté experienced incredible success working on one of the best-selling hip-hop albums ever. He faced devastating consequences that could have ended his life behind bars. He received a rare presidential clemency that gave him freedom, and he tried to use that second chance to make a difference. For the younger generation who might not know John Forté's name, this is an opportunity to learn about someone who contributed to hip-hop during a crucial era. The score came out when rap music was exploding commercially, while still maintaining artistic credibility. Forté was part of making that happen. His solo work on Rawkus showed the independent hip-hop scene thriving alongside major labels. The lessons from Forté's life go beyond just one person. This is about understanding how the music industry works, how the legal system impacts artists, how second chances can happen but remain rare, and how people can try to find meaning after facing consequences. For every Grammy nomination, there's risk. For every platinum album, there's pressure. For every success story, there are complications that don't make it into the music. What makes Forté's case particularly notable is the presidential clemency. In an era when criminal justice reform has become a major political issue, Forté's story from 2008 represents an early example of high-profile advocacy leading to reduced sentences for federal cases. The coalition that formed around his case, including Carly Simon and Senator Hatch, showed that unlikely alliances could form around questions of justice and proportionality in sentencing. His advocacy work after release adds another dimension. Instead of just trying to move on and forget about his federal case, Forté engaged with the issues directly. He spoke about mandatory minimums, about the challenges of re-entering society, about the need for reform. His willingness to use his platform and his experience to push for change showed character and commitment to something beyond just his own situation. The music he made after coming home, while not commercially successful in traditional terms, represented something important. It showed that artistic expression could continue even after major life disruptions. Waterlight Sound wasn't trying to recreate the score or chase radio play. It was an artist processing his experiences and sharing them through music. The hip-hop community has seen plenty of artists face legal troubles, but the specific arc of Forté's story remains unique. From Grammy nominations to federal custody to presidential clemency is a journey that very few people experience. The fact that he came home and tried to do something meaningful with that second chance speaks to resilience and purpose. What makes his story even more compelling is that Forté never stopped creating. In recent years, he'd been working on significant projects that showed his artistic evolution. According to reports, he contributed to HBO's revival of Eyes on the Prize in 2024, bringing his experience and perspective to one of the most important documentary series about civil rights. This work demonstrated that Forté understood the power of storytelling beyond just music, using his platform to contribute to projects with historical and cultural significance. His marriage to photographer Lara Fuller represented stability and partnership that came after years of turmoil. Together they raised 2 children, Haley and Wren, giving Forté the family life that seemed impossible during his federal custody years. Sources close to the family describe him as devoted to his children and committed to being present in their lives in ways that his own journey through the justice system had temporarily prevented. The health challenges he faced in his final year, including the seizure that occurred approximately 12 months before his passing, add another layer to understanding the complexities he was navigating. Even while dealing with medical issues and being on medication for grand mal seizures, Forté continued working on creative projects and maintaining his advocacy efforts. The dedication to his work and his family, even while managing serious health concerns, shows the character of someone who refused to let circumstances define his final chapter. Now, with his passing at 50, the story feels incomplete. There was more he could have done, more music he could have made, more advocacy work he could have pursued. But the legacy he leaves includes his contributions to one of hip-hop's greatest albums, his solo work that earned Grammy recognition, and his willingness to speak about difficult experiences after coming home. For people who worked on the score, Forté's passing is the loss of someone who was there during a special moment in hip-hop history. For people who received presidential clemency or are fighting for criminal justice reform, his story represents both the possibility of second chances and the ongoing challenges of rebuilding after incarceration. For hip-hop fans, it's the passing of someone whose work touched the culture in ways both visible and behind the scenes. The broader hip-hop community will remember John Forté for the score, for his Grammy nomination, for his journey through the federal system and back, and for trying to use his experience to advocate for others. His life embodied complexities that don't fit into simple narratives. Success and struggle, talent and consequences, Grammy nominations and federal custody, clemency and advocacy, all part of one person's journey through hip-hop and American culture. As the music world processes this loss, the conversations will touch on multiple aspects of Forté's life and work. His production contributions to the score deserve recognition as part of hip-hop history. His solo career showed promise that circumstances cut short. His federal case and presidential clemency represent a unique story in the intersection of music, justice, and politics. His advocacy work after release showed commitment to using experience for positive change. Now, I want to hear from you. Did you know about John Forté's work on the score? What do you think about his story from Grammy nominations to federal custody to presidential clemency? How do you think his legacy should be remembered in hip-hop history? Do you think enough people know about his contributions to one of the greatest hip-hop albums ever? Drop all your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one, and and I want to know where you stand on this. If this breakdown gave you the full story on John Forté's life and career and kept it real from start to finish, do me a favor and smash that subscribe button. Hit the notification bell too so you don't miss any more stories about hip-hop history and the people who shaped the culture. Trust me, there are more important stories that need to be told, and you'll want to be here when they drop. Share this video with anyone who loves the score, anyone who follows hip-hop history, or anyone who needs to understand the full story of artists whose contributions deserve recognition. The more people who know these stories, the better we preserve hip-hop culture and honor the people who built it. And if you want to see more deep dives like this on important hip-hop figures and their stories, let me know in the comments what artists or situations you want me to break down next. I'm here to give you the facts without the fluff, and your support keeps this going. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.